There's a voice that keeps on calling me down the road. That's where I'll always be. Every stop I make a new friend. Can't stay for long, just turn around and I'm gone again.
The Littlest Hobo.
Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down. Until tomorrow, I'll just keep moving on.
Starring London as the Littlest Hobo.
Now, can they really be sure there's never been a littler hobo?
I feel pretty sure there have been littler hobos because, there's always little creatures and even insects, but like mice, famously rats, riding the rails. If that's the definition of a hobo,
like historically, rodents have stowed away. It's true. They've
very
stowed
much so
on trains and on ships.
Well, that's how rats have gone all over the world.
Except in Alberta, we don't have any of those
rats. But we certainly have hobos.
Oh no,
animal hobos. I mean,
okay.
And they're littler.
There's also a human version as well. A little bit. Fortunately, a little bit everywhere.
Yeah, but they're bigger than the Littlest Hobo.
Welcome to Sweater Weather, a podcast about Canadian arts and culture. I'm Aaron.
I'm Naomi.
Today we're talking about The Littlest Hobo. This is a TV show that ran from 1979 to 1985 for 114 episodes. It stars London, a dog credited as London, and it's a German Shepherd, an ownerless dog who travels around helping people solve their problems.
Oh boy, does it ever. He.
I guess it's a he.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if the real London was a boy, because in fact, what's credited as one dog in the opening credits was actually several dogs.
Yeah, but I was just reading that they were boys, and they were
all boys.
Yeah, because their owner used them also as breeders.
Right, he studied them out. It's
studied them out.
A recent theme in our show. We're talking about show dogs.
Yeah.
Finnegan.
But Finnegan. I don't think he got studded out, but... Well,
we joke about it a little bit.
I wish I could have a puppy Finnegan.
The owner and trainer of the dog was Chuck Eisenmann. And he was an exuberant, crazy guy. That's in the words of Alan Eastman, a guy who directed maybe all or most of the episodes of the show.
Okay, so you were just reading that too. And I guess he developed this training method to train the dogs to be on the show, and then he would also, people would pay for their dogs to be trained that way too.
Oh, because I guess it was good advertisement for his dog training services. Yeah. What are your, what are your memories of The Littlest Hobo? Of course, the song that I may or may not keep in that I sang off the top. Probably sing too much in the show. It was a great effort,
especially since you have a cold and a sore throat.
I have a summertime cold. How terrible. How ironic. I got through the whole winter without really getting sick. And then I get a little bit sick. The day before we're recording our episode on The Littlest Hobo, a CanCon classic.
But you know what? If he were here, he would bring you a bag of throat lozenges.
He would know what was wrong with me.
He would lick your throat.
He would sniff the air and be like,
If you were really sick, he would bring you a COVID test to do. He wouldn't even need the test. He would just know if you had it or not.
The Littlest Hobo 2020.
Yeah. But you were asking
He's wearing an N95.
And he's like, put it on, nudging you. So anyway, he's got
a vaccination needle between his teeth.
Or just the pamphlet for the pharmacy.
Yeah, he's chasing down anti-vaxxers.
Growling. He never actually bites or anything. He just growls, and they're like, okay.
I don't know if he's ever really violent. He pushes people over and stuff.
Okay, but let me just say, because you were saying, when did we first learn our first memories of him?
What do you know about The Littlest Hobo? What do you remember?
I just remember watching, I guess it was CTV, watching TV, and the show I was watching would end, and then the music for The Littlest Hobo would come on, and then I would turn off the TV. Honestly, that's my memory.
So that was like a Pavlovian response, so to speak.
You could say so. I was under the impression that I did not enjoy animal actors.
Yeah, I mean, this really dates the show, and the dog is the star of the show. It's the only consistent cast member. Is this freaking dog. And
my impression of the show was it was just the dog running along roads and stuff.
Well, we rewatched 3 episodes, and there's a fair amount of
there's plot
of the hobo like running along.
Oh, he does like travel is a big part of being a hobo, but every episode has a lot of plot, like a lot.
Yeah, you might say it's rather rather convoluted, yeah. And you're like, you know what I want to see now? Instead of this like really confusing like series of events that are very improbable, I'd rather just see the dog running through the countryside, running along a fence or running down a country highway. It's swimming across a river.
He does all sorts of interesting travel things.
It's really fun and chill. I feel like those are the best moments in the show when you're just seeing the dog out in nature.
Well, debatable, but what's your first memory of?
Oh, I watched this thing. I mean, it was always on. I mean, you know what? It ran from 79 to 85. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, like well into my teens, the show was syndicated and it was on. I remember it on Saturday afternoons. It was kind of like a weird time, like nothing to do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, you were supposed to be mowing the lawn.
Yeah, something like that. But I mean, in the winter, maybe I wasn't.
Yeah.
Like I'd watch it on the the old tube television and the wooden cabinet in our old country house there. That I lived in till I was 16. I just remember, the song was catchy and stuff, but it was just like I got the same sad feeling from this show that I always got from Degrassi, because Degrassi was just like kind of a dark. It's like a dark universe a little bit, where it's a little too. It's like realistic and. Mm-hmm. It's not shiny and happy and false the way that Hollywood stuff is. Mm-hmm. And so I guess it was the look of the show because it was filmed. I mean, it wasn't on film. It was put on videotape. So it was kind of cheaply filmed and stuff. And then there's like this weird existentialism like at the heart of the show. Like this dog has no owner and steadfastly refuses to. He says, maybe I'll settle down in this song, but we know that in fact he'll never settle down because he would no longer be the littlest hobo.
But people always want to adopt him, and he's like, no.
I know, and he's like, no, forget it. I prefer the road. Yeah. I prefer being on my own. So there's like the sadness of the lonely dog, but then there's also the sadness of this world of the universe that the show's in, where these people they need a dog to help them, and it's just like, oh man, like. We'll talk about one of the episodes like this grandfather, is not, he's like alienated from his granddaughter and the littlest hobo is going to help them. And you're like, man, this grandfather needs a dog to help him in this way. Listen, the whole show is an excuse to hang out with a cute dog, which like gets the kid audience on board, right? Mm-hmm. But then I feel like the plots are like kind of sad.
Oh yeah,
they're not like uplifting or anything.
Well, at the end, things are better than they were before.
I guess so.
Hobo.
I mean, there are happy. I mean, it's always a happy ending, I guess. Mm-hmm. But there's something a little bit sad about the hobo.
It's
himself.
A harsh world that a hobo lives in, and that his fellow travelers live in.
Yeah. Anyway, why does everybody remember the show? It was on a lot, so I was just like, when you have antenna television. There's like nothing on Saturday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Like maybe there's some weird game show, there's like some British drama on PBS, or there's The Littlest Hobo. You've got 5 stations. So I'm going to watch The Littlest Hobo if those are my choices.
I just like refuse to watch. I've never seen Lassie, or like whenever there's like a movie or a show starring a dog or an animal as the main character, I was like, no, I'm not watching that.
You thought it was cruel?
To be honest, I just thought it was dumb or something. I don't know. Like, I really don't know why.
Well, they're limited. I mean, when your star is a dog, you are kind of limited.
I just thought it would be boring, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, arguably you were right.
But I mean, the thing is that the dog interacts with humans a lot, and that's the point of the show. But like, I wanted to say a couple of things that I don't want to forget. One is that I was just reading that the show was actually like, it was in its revival, the 1979 to 1985 show.
Yeah, it also ran for a few seasons in the 60s. It was in black and white.
Yeah, and it was
same kind of dog though. The same dog trainer too. I mean, if you think about the star being the dog, like what's central across both series, the older one and the newer one, is the dog trainer.
Yeah, and he was breeding them to like look exactly the same.
Yeah, so what you need to know about this. See, this German Shepherd, I was always like a little bit confused if it was actually a German Shepherd because his coloring is different.
Yeah,
so,
reverse masking.
Yeah, so if you don't have it, the typical breed characteristic of a German Shepherd is having a dark muzzle, and that is the kind of the image probably most of you have. But Littlest Hobo has like a white face, and so it looks a little
white
bit,
eyebrows.
Yeah, so it's called reverse masking or wolf masking because it looks more like a wolf with this coloration, and I think he's cuter, to be honest.
Oh, well, it makes him recognizable as the Littlest Hobo.
Yeah, he's a different kind of looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, which is my theory of the Littlest Hobo after watching some episodes today, is that I don't think the Littlest Hobo is actually a dog. I think the Littlest Hobo is much like the show, like Highway to Heaven. I think this is a supernatural being. Oh, yeah. Like an angelic creature. Maybe just an angel. Because this dog...
He is angelic.
He is angelic.
He also can read.
He can read. He can do a lot of things that dogs cannot do. He can understand extremely complicated stories that people tell him.
Honestly, I think the dog understood the storylines better than I did.
Yeah. He remembers people and their backstories like forever, and then he shows up again to help them again. He can find someone like from the description of a house in another city. From looking at a photograph of their porch, he can find them. And I mean, the fact that he can read, he can hitchhike. He knows when to get out of the car.
Yeah, he's like, oh, there's my stop.
This is not a dog. Let me just say this is not a dog, but
an angelic creature.
I think he's an angelic creature, but he does have
supernatural like kind of like a deity. Like it's like a god deity. Like a dog deity.
A dog-gity.
He's a dog angel. Good do-gooder.
He's not a deity.
He's a doggy do-gooder.
He's an angel.
He's a doggy do-gooder.
He's a doggy goody for
4 shoes. 4 paws.
Yeah, no, he's an angel for sure. I would say that he's definitely not a tragic figure. The reason he's not lonely, the reason that he can't live with people is because he's not a dog. Okay. That's my theory. But he has the essential qualities that we love in a dog, which is that he exists merely to love humans. And his entire being and essence and raison d'etre is loving and helping humans, and he just goes from human to human and like solves their central problem.
So he has that service animal.
Well, I have a friend who says that all dogs are actually, I can't remember if she says AI or something like that. And like just like basically AI in the sense that we've engineered them to just be what we want them to be. Like they exist to please us.
Yeah, okay.
And like in every way, like they love us.
I mean, this is a controversial take about dogs, I'm sure.
I know, but it just made me
when
think of that.
dogs steal your lunch from the table,
but the Littlest Hobo would never do that. Like he's like the ultimate dog in this way, and that he's there to love you, to give you what you need. He has no needs of his own.
Yeah, I mean, he's a human creation. This is what he is.
I'm saying that the angelic qualities that he possesses are like an exaggeration of dog qualities that we cherish.
Yeah, I gotcha. I mean, he is the perfect dog, except that he won't stick around. He'll run off again.
Yeah.
So,
but he's like Mary Poppins that way, right? It's like
Mary Poppins or like other stuff from the 80s. You already mentioned Highway to Heaven. Like he's in, Michael Landon's an angel who shows up in town to help for that day, basically. There's a Quantum Leap, another 80s show that's very much like that.
Do-gooders going around.
They're just plopping in for an episode. Kind of an interesting story concept that works really well for the episodic series of that era.
And it's like sentimental, feel good kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's no through line, right? I mean, there's no through line from beginning to the end of a season. And that's just matches like the way the broadcast TV was, right? Like you were lucky if you got to see one of these episodes and you didn't necessarily see them all in order or whatever. So we talked about this actually being like kind of a reboot of a 1960s series that was successful, but it was I guess it ended because there was a dispute between the producers about who actually owned the rights to the show. So it was stopped. But then this fellow named Christopher Dew, he worked as an editor on the original series, and he like basically called up the producers afterwards, like in the 70s, and it was like, can you give me will you sell me the rights to the show because I want to make it again? And they did. And so that's Christopher Dewey. He's the producer of the Littlest Hobo. That was the most famous from 79 to 85. There was actually also like a low budget movie from 1958.
Oh, okay.
But it was an American movie, but it had the same concept. It was a German Shepherd who went around doing good deeds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean just the idea of like the extensive use of a animal actor is really like dated as well. Like it makes me think of Danger Bay. We did a previous episode of Sweater Weather on Danger Bay. Go check that out. And that's a topic we talk about too, which is the use of animals.
Yeah, that's true. But it was definitely the humans that were the main characters in that one. Yeah,
but I mean, I talk about like the ethical, like kind of issues about using an animal. Yeah. So if you even like read a little bit of a oral history of the Littlest Hobo, and the director was just talking about Chuck Eisenmann, the trainer, and he says Chuck was an exuberant, crazy guy. Poor actors would be trying to work, while this guy would be screaming at the top of his lungs, like at the dog. It's like, keep looking at the ball, damn it! So he has to like keep the dogs engaged, and so he would be very loud and aggressive often, like having to basically bully the dogs to do this
I guess,
and to do that. And so actors were often put off by like the working conditions there.
Yikes.
Yeah, you can imagine, right? I mean, it's kind of weird. Yeah, I mean, obviously like dogs are, not to be too much of a downer, but I think it's a reason why we don't see shows like this anymore too, is I think there's more ethical.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think so.
But I mean, like this dog had to do a lot of stuff. Like there's also, I'm sure, dogs on TV, like the dog in Frasier or whatever that like had to do a few little tricks. But
few things here and there.
Yeah, but mostly was just there to be cute.
This dog is on camera 95% of the show. Yeah. And it's like every cut is like the dog having to be looking this way, having to look that way, running down a road.
Like saving someone from drowning.
Climbing through a window, like walking along. It's like every single, like, I mean, the trainer and the dogs are doing like 90% of the acting, it feels like.
Yeah, it couldn't have been great for the dogs.
Another anecdote the director says is that like, we had one episode we needed a shot where there was a dog jumping out of a plane with a parachute on. And so he's like, hey, like talking to the trainer, like, hey, maybe we could put a parachute on one of these dogs. And like Chuck, the trainer, like thinks about it and is like, no, that's too risky.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, well, we'll do it with a dog dummy. And so they throw a dog dummy out of an airplane. And the parachute doesn't open. And the dog dummy just like slams into the ground.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And the director's telling this as if it's a funny anecdote. It's like, oh, you mean the time you almost
killed a dog.
You wanted to kill a dog.
You almost threw a dog out of a plane to plummet to its death. Hilarious.
Oh my God.
London. Poor London. Well, he averted a terrible fate.
So there were 5 dogs at least, and so there was always the main dog, who was like 7 or 8 years old, was the best trained, was still young enough to be responsive and agile. And so most of the close shots would be on the patriarch dog, apparently. That was the head of the pack. There'd be 2 or 3 younger dogs who would do a lot of the stunts, a lot of the jumping and stuff like that. And then there was apparently like always a puppy. There was like a very...
Oh, really?
Yeah, like a pup who was being trained.
Okay.
Hanging out with them the whole time so that they could be trained.
But not on camera.
I don't think that one was on camera very much. And there's another anecdote where they needed... Okay, so the scene called for Littlest Hobo to be drugged and stumbling.
Oh my God.
And so what they did is they got an old dog who had a arthritic hip and couldn't really walk properly. And so they filmed the dog like kind of stumbling over a log, and the director said this looked great. It was exactly what we wanted it to be. Then after the episode aired, he got all this hate mail. Because the viewers thought they had really drugged London to do this scene, and they had to make a press release and say that, oh no, it was like an old dog who was like the old. He was the sire of all these other of all the other dogs on the show.
Either that was a really quick thinking PR move, or it really happened that way.
I wonder what really happened, because he'd have to tell us. He couldn't tell us if it were anything different. Anyway, so the show aired for in 80 countries, and it was apparently on CTV and reruns until 2013.
Okay,
so that's a long freaking time. Yeah. The first episode that we'll talk about today is one called The Locket. This is the highest IMDb rating. That's why we chose it. I also have vague memories of this. This is season 3, episode 10 from 1981. And, you know, the show.
This one had a relatively straightforward plot.
This one was easy to follow. I really liked it. I feel like this is the distillation of the essence of The Littlest Hobo.
Distillation of the essence. Right down to
the
essence of the essence.
Purity of the soul of The Littlest Hobo. Well, we got the theme song. We got the montage at the beginning of the Littlest Hobo swimming in a river, running through a field, picking up a phone, carrying a rifle, riding in a hot air balloon.
He appears to be typing at one point. Or is that a phone?
I don't know. He could type. It's well established, especially in this episode, that he reads. He reads very well.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, he reads street signs.
Yeah.
Anyway, so...
You can basically read a map and follow it.
Yeah.
Which is more than I can do.
He's got a great sense of direction.
Great
and
sense
Naomi
of direction.
famously does not.
And I think that is realistic for a dog.
He just lifts his nose to the... He doesn't like follow his nose, you know?
Not much.
No, he's like reading street signs.
More evidence that he's not a dog. And he looks at photographs and like recognizes people
in
from,
them.
Yeah.
He
doesn't smell something and then smell them.
No, he doesn't smell. He doesn't act like a dog. He acts
He's
a lot
not
like...
a dog.
Yeah, he's not really a dog. So this opens with an idyllic field in the summertime. The Littlest Hobo approaches in the distance. He runs up to a cabin where there's an old man. He's like a reclusive lumberjack type wilderness fellow. He's wearing red and black.
That's a beard.
He has a beard and he's got a red and black plaid on. And he's
classic.
He's like leaning out of the cabin window, talking to a raccoon. There's a raccoon, right. And he's like, get out of here, raccoon. You've been eating enough of my garden or whatever. And so then he sees the Littlest Hobo show up and he's like, oh, hello, fella. What a nice doggy you are. And then he's like immediately in trouble. Mm-hmm. The window slams shut.
On his hand.
And like inexplicably, it's just like it's a normal size window, but inexplicably his hand is like stuck under the window and he can't pull it out. And he's like struggling and he's like swooning, and the Littlest Hobo sees this, and so he runs into the cabin. He gets in somehow, and he brings to the old man a crowbar, so that the old man is like, "Oh, thank you so much, doggy," and he like He uses the crowbar to pry his hand free.
Yeah, and can I just say I had that exact accident. A window fell on my hand like that, and it is really a terrible
It's painful
injury. My hand was extremely bruised and one of my fingers was broken.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Really?
Really.
And happily, the Littlest Hobo was there to help you.
But it was very, very heavy. Well, my roommate was there to help me.
Yeah.
Although, to be honest, she dropped the window on my hand in the first place.
She shut it on your hand?
Yeah, and it's actually a horrifying story because we were locked out and we were trying to break back into the house, and she was holding the window up for me to climb through it. And then she dropped it on my hand. So if it had been like a few seconds later, she would have dropped it on my head or my back. And it was like extremely heavy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't have hurt as much on your back.
But it was the first day we met as well.
Wow.
We became friends.
Yeah. Well, if this had happened between 1979 and 1985, the hobo would have helped you. Your timing was off.
But also, I mean, that old man had no one. So that, like, as we learn, he has no one in the world. Like, I had my roommate. And I was in a city, but he was like, not only is he in the country and is a recluse, so no one comes to check on him, but he's alienated his one living relative.
He says, I don't really like visitors. It could have been weeks before someone would find me.
Mm-hmm. He'd be dead.
He'd be dead in there. He almost fainted.
Mm-hmm.
And, cut to the hobo, his tongue hanging out, kind of smiling. There's so many reaction shots of the dog. And it's like, oh. His tongue's out a little further. He's extra happy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's looking that way.
He's like, wow, doggy, you're a great dog. Thanks so much. And then he proceeds to tell the dog his life story.
Yeah, I like this about the Littlest Hobo. You have a lot of monologues.
Yeah.
Because someone's talking to the dog.
Yeah.
And you're getting all of the exposition. He says, I'm getting too old to be close to anybody. You're like, oh. Oh.
And he used to have this wife that he loved a lot, obviously.
He had a wife. Wife's dead. He tells a story about how his granddaughter came to visit when, her grandmother, his wife, was dying. and they got in some kind of a kerfuffle.
I think she wanted to stay and take care of him, and he was like, I don't need help. You go
like,
live your life. Get out of here.
Yeah, like, go make it big. And she was like, I was mad because she dropped out of university to do this or whatever. And he's like, you go live your life. And so he says, like, I don't need anybody. And so apparently that kind of scares off the granddaughter.
Yeah, and they never speak again. They haven't spoken since. But
he has this locket. He has a piece of jewelry. He opens it up to show the Littlest Hobo. He's like, yeah, that's my wife. That's a picture of my wife in there. It's like, I should have given this to my granddaughter when I had the chance. Oh, well, I guess I'll just never see her again. And he's still talking to the Littlest Hobo, and he shows him a picture of the granddaughter. And this is important. It's the granddaughter standing on a dock in front of a sign that says Port Albany.
Alberni.
Is it Point? It's not Port Albany.
I don't know. I thought it was maybe Port Albany Marina.
It's Port Albany Marina. That's where the daughter lives. So this like image is burned into the hobo's memory.
Yeah.
Because he's going to follow that image. And
then
so
the old man falls asleep.
The old man falls asleep. We wonder for a minute if he's dead. If he's dead. Is he dead? But the hobo's hanging out. He's like hanging out by the fire or whatever. And then when the old man falls asleep, the hobo, who's apparently understood word for word this old man's whole story, takes the locket.
Yeah.
Takes it in his mouth by the chain.
Yeah.
And he moves towards the door. He's going to bring it to the granddaughter.
Yeah.
Obviously. And on the way out, hobo looks back behind him.
Old man's eyes
are open looking at him.
Their eyes meet.
Their eyes meet. And then
they both.
And the old man nods his head. Like,
and the dog's like, mm-hmm.
Like they both know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Somehow this old man knows the dog's going to go hunt down the granddaughter. So hobo running along the road. He sees a sign for Port Albany, 91 kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
And he reads the sign. And he follows the sign.
Then he goes to a gas station and gets a ride.
He meets a friendly big rig driver. This truck driver, looks kind of like Elvis in his heavier days. And he's like, you want to ride there, friend? Okay, hop on in. And they drive a little while. And then at a certain point, the hobo wants to get out. So the truck driver stops. He's like, okay, I'll let you have a pit stop. Don't be long. And then the hobo just runs off. And then the truck driver's like, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep you here long.
Yeah, people always have that sense. They're like, I wish I could keep you, but I guess that's not the kind of dog you are.
Right. Now, a German Shepherd running wild across the countryside into the city would be extremely dangerous. It would be a hazard for everyone. I guess there was a time when, there were more stray dogs running around Canada before we had very strict animal control regulations. Now,
but people can feel that he's not a dog. They can tell there's something different.
He's just chill. He's very nice. I mean, he's whatever he needs to be in the moment.
Yeah.
Like there's another episode we'll talk about where he needs to be mean because he's scaring off a bike robber.
Oh yeah.
So this bully is stealing his kid's bike.
He growls him. He growls in this episode too. Actually.
He growls when he needs to growl.
Yeah.
That's right. A place where they do have a lot of stray dogs still, stray animals generally, is Italy. Now, there's less than, let's say, 20 years ago when I kind of started going to Italy regularly. Mm-hmm. But it's actually quite scary to encounter a dog.
Vicious.
Like a dog just walk. I mean, if they've lived as long as they have amongst people publicly, like in the piazza or hanging around these little farm towns roadside and stuff, they're probably not vicious because somebody would have done something about a problematic dog, but you still don't know unless maybe I guess people get to know the local dogs that are hanging out and stuff. But it is kind of scary to encounter a strange dog, and actually in Italy, all those stray dogs, they're little dogs. They're small. They're almost all small dogs. A large dog running around on its own wouldn't be permitted, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, we live in a world where it's friendly, it's receptive to an ownerless German Shepherd running around.
At least this particular one.
So it's raining. The hobo's walking down the road, gets caught in the rain. He stops to hang out with a young couple who are out camping. They're in a camper. And the reason you're like, why is he stopped here to talk to these two? And you realize he thinks he's read the words Port Albany on this couple's boat that is hitched up on a trailer. And they show that like there's like chains or something hanging down that is partially obscuring the word. So what it actually says on the boat is Sport Albatross, but it looks that much like Port Albany.
Yeah.
That the dog stopped, and he
sleeps under the trailer.
Under the trailer, thinking that's the way.
Yeah.
So that's a very brief pit stop. He's like, oh, he just has a nice little moment where he says hello to the couple.
Then he realizes what it actually says, and he runs off.
Now this is when he finally gets to Port Albany, and it says that on the street side.
Well, he sees another boat that says Port Albany Marina, and he follows that.
Yeah, and he follows that one. That's how he gets there. Yeah. And so he arrives at the marina, and as he's like looking around, suddenly his locket is snatched away from him. He was hanging out of his mouth, and he runs, barking, chasing after these two hoodlums who have taken his locket. They run into an old building, abandoned warehouse, and slam the door shut behind them. And these two hoodlums, one of them is the boss.
One of them's the leader.
He's the leader. He's a bully.
Yeah.
And the other one is like, I don't think we should have done that.
We shouldn't have stolen a locket from a dog.
We're gonna get caught. And then the boss bully is really funny because he's wearing like a denim vest with nothing underneath it.
Of course he is.
So he's basically the denim vest is open. So this guy is he's got his arms and his chest hanging out and stuff. And
he's tough.
He's a tough, and he talks like a city tough. You know, he plays.
And he's like, we may hit the big time with this locket.
This locket.
This thing's worth a fortune. And the other guy's like, oh my God, we're gonna get caught.
And then, so the head tough, he opens up the locket and he says, "Would you look at this? It's a picture of an old broad." And then his scaredy cat friend is like, "Oh, I don't know." So the hobo's trying to get his locket back. He climbs up onto the roof of the warehouse and he's like rattling the vents.
He starts throwing crap down the vent.
Yeah, and he's
scare them.
And he's scaring. He really at that point he scares henchman number 2 so much. He's like, I'm getting out of here, and he like runs out of the warehouse.
It doesn't close the door behind him.
It leaves the door open behind him. So that's just the opportunity Hobo needed to get in there.
Yeah.
He confronts hoodlum number 1.
Yeah.
And he's like, hoodlum number 1 is like looking at Hobo. They're scared, and you see hoodlum versus Hobo. Hoodlum looks over. He sees like a chisel stuck in, like he's like, oh, I'm gonna grab this chisel and basically kill this dog. Talk about a bad guy, right?
Because he wants this incredibly valuable locket.
Hobo, seeing what's gonna happen, pulls a block from a tire that was holding a tractor in place, like a lawnmower, and the lawnmower rolls back and hits the hoodlum, knocking him over. The locket flies up in the air, lands on the ground. Hobo grabs the locket, looks at the hoodlum, who's looking at him scared, like, is this dog going to disembowel me now? But he's like too nice to do that, obviously. Yeah. He's like, I'm not going to do this for revenge.
Yeah.
I think this hoodlum has learned his lesson.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take my locket and keep moving on. And so he's got the locket, and he finds the view, the vista, the very picture of the granddaughter. He finds it in real life, which is this dock at Port Albany. The granddaughter lives apparently on a houseboat. She's not there or something. The hobo's waiting outside for her to show up or something. And it's like it's nighttime now. The light comes on in the boat, and the hobo basically goes up to the door of the houseboat, knocks on it.
No, he doesn't.
He drops the locket, making a sound.
Yeah.
And then scurries off into the shadows. Yeah. The granddaughter comes out looking around like, hello, who's there? Can't see anything. Just as she's going back into her houseboat, looks down and sees the locket.
Yeah, and then she's like, Grandpa, because she thinks her grandfather must be there.
And he's like calling out, Grandpa. He the grandpa must have delivered the locket. But no, it was the hobo. Hobo never shows himself.
No.
He's just like sitting back, kind of nodding, like, yep, my job is done. Cut to the next day. Someday. Yeah. Granddaughter running through the fields to her grandpa's cabin. Grandpa. And he's like, oh, granddaughter.
They run into each other's arms.
And they tell each other everything. And he's like, I'm sorry I never wrote back to you. And the granddaughter's like, I thought you didn't want to see me anymore. That's why. And then it's like, why didn't you answer my letters or even just write me a postcard to say you were okay? And then the grandfather says, well, I was really ashamed. Something that you didn't know about me. It's like, I can't write. I can't read or write.
Yeah.
So he was illiterate.
Yeah, so that's why the whole time we're like, why didn't he just mail her the locket?
Yeah, he couldn't mail a letter.
Yeah.
Anyway, the irony in this episode is that the grandfather can't read or write, but guess who can?
The dog.
The dog reads pretty well. This episode is about literacy in a weird way.
Yeah, it is. In a very strange way,
It's like, I never learned to read, granddaughter. And he's like,
presumably, like, neither of them has a phone, or like he doesn't have a phone.
This is like 1982, as if phones haven't been invented. Anyway, so
he doesn't have one, I guess.
but she lives on a houseboat.
Yeah.
So maybe that actually works. Like I guess she wouldn't have. I mean, this is the era of landlines only, so she wouldn't have a phone there, I guess.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, they walk off hand in hand together, like reunited, and the grandfather says, "Let me tell you about this very special dog."
Yeah, but he also tells her, "I have to tell you something. I love you." And she's like, "What? You do, Grandpa?"
And he says, when I said that I don't need you, it doesn't mean that I don't love you.
Yeah. Very sweet.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That was the best episode we watched, I think.
Yeah. And then the second one we watched, that one we picked because actually the way that this show came into our minds was we were chatting with some of my relatives in a family visit recently, and my sister and father had seen this episode, and my sister was talking about it.
This other not the one. This is featuring a ballerina. It's called...
and she was saying she remembered this episode from childhood and how like just sort of had impressionistic memories of it being like quite absurd.
This is a pretty absurd episode.
Yes.
It's called It's called Music Box, season 3, episode 12, 1981 as well. This is guest starring the famous Canadian ballerina Karen Kane. She looks like she's like in her late 20s here, maybe 30 or something. And a lot of this is filmed, at Casa Loma, I believe. Yeah. It's called in the show, the episode, they give it a different name. They call it Casa Lorraine. Yeah. This is what I call spice washing. Yeah. When they wash away the Italianness of something, they whitewashed it. They spice washed it.
I've never heard you say that before.
I don't know why it couldn't have just been...
Why do you think they washed away the spice?
I don't know why they just didn't call it Casa Loma, because I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Anyway...
I never thought of Casa Loma as being Italian before.
Well, it isn't. It's an Italian-inspired... I mean, the guy who built it was, one of these wealthy...
Casa Loma is a big castle type thing in downtown Toronto.
Yeah, built in the 1920s.
I used to live right down the street from it, but when I was a kid, my family used to go there to visit it, on a day trip from Barrie, where my grandparents lived, and my sister and I, or at least I, thought it was called Castle Oma because we called our grandmother Oma. And they'd always say, "Let's go to Castle Oma." Anyway, I've been there.
Yeah, it is Casa Loma.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, I've been there too. I mean, I think our school probably took us on a trip there. It's just built like a castle, but it was built in the 1920s or something. A wealth.
Like it was someone's house?
A wealthy industrialist basically made this his pet project to build a ridiculous building.
And now there's just tours and stuff there.
Yeah, I think it's like a public anyway, the way it appears in the show in this episode is a museum. And there's a girl playing on the ramparts of this Casa Loma. Littlest Hobo shows up. The way he just does. He just rolls into the scene, he's looking around. He's, there's a girl up there playing, and she's singing a song and dancing around and talking about being a princess and talking about being a ballerina. And then the Littlest Hobo watches as the security guard for the museum grabs her and come on, you got to come down here. You're not allowed in here. But then she escapes and is running around inside the museum. The Littlest Hobo's there watching now too, and she grabs a music box that's part of a museum exhibition that's dedicated to a famous ballerina dancer named Vivian Barrie or something. And there's a picture. It's in black and white of a woman dancing.
And it's
Karen Kane, I guess, but you can't tell because it's a small photo and it's kind of grainy resolution. But and so she's like, this is a famous ballerina and this belongs to her or whatever.
She
And
says, this is my mother.
She says, this is my mother.
She's talking to the hobo.
So she's talking to the hobo, monologuing, telling her story. So this ballerina is her mother.
Yes, and she wants to be ballerina like her.
Okay, we're in Casaloma still. Anyway, so she gets chased out of Casaloma and the dog goes with her. Hobo goes with her. So they're walking around Toronto now in the neighborhood and cut to a dance studio where Karen Kane is a ballerina teacher.
Ballet teacher.
She's a ballet teacher and she's giving lessons. And a couple of her students are like, see the little girl out on the outside of the studio and says, oh, you're going to come in and take lessons? And the little girl says, no, I'm not allowed to or whatever. Or I think it's Karen Kane later on who's like, no, I'm not going to. This is like her main thing. I'm not going to teach my daughter ballet. Because
she tells her daughter ballet is a heartbreaking thing. Like most people don't make it. And even if you do, you can injure yourself and your career is ruined. And that's what we learned happened to her. And also you age out of it and at 30, but she doesn't mention that. Anyway,
it's kind of convoluted. I mean, I guess you have to, because I'm like, for half of this episode, I really didn't know what was going on. I was like, because this daughter is, the way she's presented is that she's a dreamer and she's living in a fantasy world. And so when she's saying, this is my mother, you're like, so is that really, like, is her mother really this ballerina? And I think the show was intending for us to know that.
I think it was pretty clear to me.
I didn't believe it. I was like,
oh, okay.
Because the way, I was like, why is there a museum exhibition for a woman who is 28 years old?
Oh yeah, that made no sense.
And it's in black and white pictures. It looks like this is from the 19th century
and
or something.
And there's just this exhibit on her and there's nothing else in the museum that we ever see. And there's no one else in the museum that we ever see.
It's totally
except
empty.
For this little girl and one security guard.
There's more, there are two security guards.
Oh yeah, two.
There are more security guards than visitors to this museum. And I was just confused the whole time. So, but no, it is okay. So the main conflict here is that the mother does not want to teach her daughter ballet
or let her take ballet lessons,
even though she was a world famous ballerina and is currently a ballet teacher.
Yeah, but she doesn't want her daughter to follow her footsteps because she thinks her daughter will only get hurt.
It's just a convoluted kind of nonsensical plot because it's like, of course you're going to teach your daughter some dance. It doesn't mean she's going to become.
Well, she wants to be a dancer herself, and the mom's like, no, that's not a good career choice.
So I'm just going to not let you do anything.
Yeah.
The problem is Karen Kane, not a great actress or whatever, but it's like
she's fine.
She's fine, but it's just like she should have a character arc where she's mean. She's
she's very nice.
She's mean at first, and then she softens up and is like, okay, I'll let you do your ballet lessons. I'll teach you. But there's no arc for her at all. She's just
there is.
What is there?
She doesn't want her daughter to take any risks. And then she's willing to let her take risks in the sense that she's 5 and she doesn't have a babysitter or any adult supervision.
Yeah.
But she doesn't want her to risk her career by taking ballet lessons. Then there's this whole sequence about the music box in the museum that's part of the exhibit that the episode's named after, but is a bit it's kind of a tangent. So the girl goes and steals the music box from the museum, her mother's former music box. Then there's this whole thing. The security guards are trying to get it back. And the Littlest Hobo.
They call the cops.
Meanwhile, the Littlest Hobo.
The cops go looking for the girl.
Yeah.
And they meet Karen Kane at the studio and is like, well, your daughter, we think she took this box.
And she keeps coming to the museum and she's obsessed with your exhibit.
So that's when Karen Kane realizes, oh, my daughter, maybe I'm doing her harm by not letting her have
that's right
the object of her fantasy, which is the dance.
So then the Littlest Hobo steals the music box back from the little girl and takes it back to the museum.
Yeah, he's because he wants to get her out of trouble.
Yeah, so he puts it back quickly before she can get caught.
The cops are on us, are on our trail.
Then the girl is like, where'd the music box go? It can't have gone back to the museum by itself. It's not magic. Then she goes back to the museum and checks, and she's like, oh my God, it's back. It is magical.
Yeah.
Then she falls asleep on the chair in the museum.
Yeah.
And there's no one else in the museum. It appears to be night.
The Littlest Hobo leads Karen Kane to the museum.
Yeah, takes her to the where the daughter's sleeping.
It's I'll show you where your daughter is, honey.
Then, this is the really weird part that I would be honored to describe.
Okay.
The Littlest Hobo noses through Karen Kane's bag and gets out her point shoes and brings them to her.
Her ballet shoes.
Yeah, her point shoes.
Delivers them like a good dog bringing slippers to its owner.
And the mother's like, Oh, I know what you're saying. The mother puts on the dress in the exhibit, her former ballet dress.
That's right.
Puts on the point shoes.
Yes.
Opens the music box, so it starts playing the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
And then proceeds to dance for her daughter.
And
her daughter wakes up.
But it's filmed as a dream because
it's like a soft focus lens, like Vaseline on the lens.
Yeah.
And the daughter wakes up, and there's her mother in soft focus doing that.
The Nutcracker.
The Nutcracker suite, or no, what's that part?
Yeah,
the dance of the sugar plum fairy.
Yeah. So she's the sugar plum fairy.
Yeah. And she's doing this like dance that the little girl loves, and the little girl's like, "Am I dreaming? Is this really happening?" And of course, like Karen Kane was gonna dance at some point. Like that's the whole point of having her.
But it goes on a long time.
It goes on. She does seems to do that whole part of the Nutcracker.
It goes on a couple of minutes. You're like, okay.
It goes all the time, but I actually appreciated it because, like, obviously she's a.
But you gotta have her dancing if she's.
Yeah, that's the whole point of Karen Kane being on the show.
Yeah.
And
so the point is, like, the mother like fulfilled the daughter's fantasy, and is now going to let the daughter dance.
Well, I mean, that doesn't really lead to that conclusion necessarily. But then the daughter, before the mother stops dancing, she falls back asleep conveniently. So the mother is able to bring her home, put her in bed, and then when the daughter wakes up in the morning, she's like, "Did that really happen, or was it a dream?" And the mother won't tell her.
Yeah.
And the mother's all cagey about it. But then the mother says, "I'm so proud of you for returning the music box to the museum that I'm going to let you have ballet lessons after all."
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "And that dog, we owe him a lot, but he went hoboing again. He's gone." But the little girl doesn't say, "I didn't bring the music box back."
Yeah.
She just is like, "Yay, ballet lessons."
Yeah, but she didn't. I know. It is a very convoluted episode. This one has a very troublesome like through line. It's just not really
And
there.
then she's like, "Did that really happen last night, or was it a dream?" And the mother's like, "I guess you'll never know." Or, "I told you had a vivid imagination," which just seems kind of weird to not admit. But then as she stands up to walk away, her hip hurts, and she's like, "Oh, ow, ow." So you know that she really did do the dance that she wasn't supposed to do because of her injury.
Oh, that's what that meant. Of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was all a dream. No, it wasn't.
It wasn't a dream at all. Her mother did this really wacky thing.
Yeah. So that one, it wasn't my favorite of the episodes.
I quite enjoyed it.
I like the countryside. I like the countryside episodes.
I like the city.
That was a city episode.
I quite enjoyed it. I liked that it was in Toronto. I enjoyed that it was Karen Kane. I liked the sugar plum fairy dance. I liked that it was so weird and convoluted.
I just think there wasn't enough dog, not enough hobo in that one.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
That's fair. There wasn't as much
because they
hobo.
had a guest star.
Yeah.
So they wanted to make the most of Karen Kane. And I just feel like when you're watching Littlest Hobo, you want some doggo. And there wasn't a lot. As you can tell, there wasn't as much dog in this one.
Obviously the dog can't be trained to dance.
Well, I was
surprisingly.
I was disappointed. I was like, oh, he's finally going to put on his point shoes.
Get up on those toes.
Oh. In an era of CGI, they probably would have done the show that way.
Oh, for sure. And that would have been amazing. So we did watch a third episode. I don't know if we want to recount the whole thing.
I don't know. This one was, we don't have to recount the whole thing, but it was, I like this one. It was called Finders Keepers. And it takes place at a
camp.
At a camp, summer camp for kids. Yeah. So just how old are these kids? These boys are 10 years old? Yeah.
And then their counselors are 16, 17, 18.
They're probably more like 20.
Yeah, but I think we're supposed to believe that they're 18.
Yeah, and so this is in classic, old-fashioned summer camp style. It's called Camp Totem, and there are totem poles, and there's a
each
teepee.
cabin is named after
it's kind of weird, eh?
Tribe or whatever. Yeah,
it's each cabin is the Apaches or the Iroquois or something.
And there's supposed to be teams that are facing off all summer.
Isn't that such a weird thing about camp culture? Was that all the indigenous appropriation?
Oh yeah, that was
so odd, but that went on for so long.
Yeah.
So that's a throwback to
absolutely
to that, but
and so it's a few days before camp started, and there's two kids that have been dropped off early, so they're the only kids at camp. There's the counselors.
It's Danny and Bobby are the two kids. And then Danny and Bobby, the fun thing about them is Hobo rolls up, of course, shows up at Camp Totem. And
Mm-hmm.
the hobo has a history with both Danny and Bobby.
Yeah, they each have their own memories of having met him before.
So like first Danny
saved their lives.
Yeah, in previous episodes. So this is a great cost-saving technique when you're producing an episode of The Littlest Hobo. You manage to fit in probably a good 5 minutes of flashback to two earlier episodes.
Yeah.
So that saves you a lot of time.
He saved both their lives at least once.
Like, hey, you're doing 22 episodes a season. You're like trying to save where you can. But like it actually works for our purposes because it was like, oh, you get like kind of 3 for the price of 1 because you get like the highlight moments from 2 other episodes too. So Danny, this actually I remember seeing this original episode with Danny where his father owns a junkyard and like Hobo is like a junkyard dog. Like he's like protecting the junkyard or he shows up there or something. And so what happens in that episode that we see glimpses of is that like Danny is, I already mentioned him getting bullied, someone trying to steal his bike and the hobo like runs off the bully. And then at the end, like the climax of the episode is that Danny's like thrown in the trunk of a car in the junkyard where bad guys like robbers put the car in a compactor and they're crushing the car until the hobo like stops the machine and saves them. So that was that episode.
Pretty intense.
And I remember that episode actually. Mm-hmm. And then when Bobby shows up and he's like, oh, I know this dog. It's you. So Bobby's history is that he was an orphan. He was an orphan and he was literally riding the rails.
Yeah, he was sitting in a boxcar playing a harmonica.
In like on the prairies. There's like a field of like wheat. And it's like
he was like 5.
And he's 5 years old playing the harmonica.
And the littlest hobo
shows up to help him or whatever. Yeah. And then what ended up happening in that episode is that at one point Bobby is walking along the train tracks and is about to get hit by a train and the hobo pushes him off the tracks just in the nick of time. So then they cut back to the present episode and Bobby's like, yeah, he saved my life. And because of that, I was eventually adopted and now I have a nice family.
Sent me to camp a few days early for some reason.
For some reason to get rid of me.
And then I don't really want to recount the whole episode here.
I mean, it's just like there's evil there's like there's 2 counselors.
Bad counselor, good counselor.
There's a bad counselor and there's a good counselor. And the bad counselor wants to set the 2 kids against each other because he's like, they're like living in different cabins for the summer.
They can't be friends.
They can't be friends because they have to compete at all the events all summer. And then there's the good counselor who has a nice Italian name, by the way. So what is his name? Giorgio or something? Anyway, he's like, no, they should be friends or whatever. And so they have like...
not about
They have a rival. So like these 2 kids have a rivalry over like, whose dog is this? Is my dog?
The bad counselor tricks them into thinking about like, oh, one of you can keep the dog at the end of the summer. And then they start not liking each other because they both want to keep the dog at the end of the summer. Then they start fighting. Then they challenge each other to a contest.
They're going to run across this rickety bridge.
They're going to like tightrope across it.
They're going to see who can cross this weird bridge blindfolded. Now this bridge is just like, it's like two tree trunks perilously spanning a creek. And so they've challenged each other to walk across this blindfolded.
Meanwhile, the littlest hobo's locked in a cabin because they're going to call the pound on him.
Yeah.
The littlest hobo has to escape to save himself and to save the 2 kids. And he does. And
he does. He claws his way through the screen of this cabin, gets outside. And this is why I like this episode is because of this final sequence. Like it's a true action adventure sequence because this is an action adventure show. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's its strength. So when the dog is out there doing stuff, that's when we love it. That's why I love it. So here we have, I don't know which one, Danny. So Danny is the first to slip and fall. Mm-hmm. From this tree trunk.
For some reason, he doesn't swim. He just sits there and floats in the water.
Because he hits his head on a rock.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So he slips and falls and hits his head on a rock. And then we cut to like these very disturbing scenes, which it looks like they made the kid do this. Floating belly up in the water. So they cut to the
belly
kid.
Down.
Excuse me, belly down in the water. So you're like, oh my God, they had this kid just... Hold your breath, Danny.
Yeah.
And so Littlest Hobo's first task when he shows up is to jump into the water and pull Danny ashore. Mm-hmm. You know, so you see Danny's breathing now, so he's okay. But in the meantime, Bobby, who was still up on the tree trunk crossing the river, now he's slipped and he's fallen. Well, and he's hanging on by his hand, just hanging on.
And the dog's like, oh my God.
So the dog's like, oh my God, rolls his eyes. He's like, ruh, and he has to go back up. He goes back up, he crosses the bridge, and he like So what he does to save Bobby is he has a red handkerchief.
Yeah.
The kind that you might tie around your neck,
Make a bindle.
With. Like, yeah, it is a hobo's paraphernalia.
Yeah.
He hangs onto this with his mouth, hangs the handkerchief down to Bobby, who grabs onto it with both hands, and the hobo pulls Bobby up by the red handkerchief.
Yeah.
And he's safe, and he's made it. And he's great.
And he's fine.
It's great. And so that is the kind of scene that I want in the Littlest episode of Littlest Hobo. I want an action scene.
And then what happens at the end? They're like, who's going to get to keep him?
So there's this. So Danny's sitting on one side of the frame, Bobby's sitting on the other side, and he's like, hobo's sitting in the middle. It's like, now you have to choose who you're going to go home with this summer, at the end of the summer. And Littlest Hobo goes over to Danny, licks him, and you're like, oh, it's going to be Danny? Then he goes over to Bobby. Bobby gives him a big hug, and then Littlest Hobo walks off. He walks off, and the two kids are like, welp, I guess he knows that we're old enough that we don't need him anymore.
That's their conclusion.
That's what Danny concludes. Yeah. Bobby agrees. Mm-hmm. And the Littlest Hobo looks at them and then turns around and walks away.
And he's like, don't do any more crazy shit.
No more crossing. No more blindfolded crossing of rivers, please. So that's the Littlest Hobos. I like that episode. You get 3 for the price of 1 in that ep. It's kind of fun. I'm remembering, I have flashes of a few other episodes. I remember one at Canada's Wonderland. I remember this very well because it was really eerie, that episode, because Canada's Wonderland was empty. They emptied it to film. And so you're seeing all this place that of course I've been to several times as a kid coming from Southern Ontario. It was always super crowded. It was like always, probably nothing compared to today, but it was like very long lines and everything. And so seeing it empty was really eerie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, obviously, the convolutions of that particular episode, but I remember a scene where the Littlest Hobo, of course, climbs into a roller coaster. And I believe
London.
I think he has to save a kid who's like stuck on the roller coaster.
Does he have to ride do you see him?
I think he's in the cart.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I think he's in a roller coaster cart. I mean, the way they shoot it, I mean, the editing had to be very creative, of course. So you would.
I'm just worried about London.
Even when you see Bobby being pushed off of the train tracks, it's like there was no train anywhere near him.
Oh, sure.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But
they're not going to endanger a kid.
Well, it was the 80s.
Yes, true.
You see playgrounds in the 80s?
Yeah, it's
pretty dangerous places.
I only saw them. I fell onto gravel on my face.
Yeah. So that's the Littlest Hobo. It was fun to revisit the Littlest Hobo. I mean, I hadn't thought about it in a long time. It's kind of a cliche of CanCon, I guess, because it's like the song is so memorable.
Yes.
And just like it's such a
that opening sequence.
The concept for the show is so ridiculous.
Oh yeah, but it worked.
Sweet. I mean, it ran for 114 episodes.
Like, who doesn't want to be saved by a dog?
Yeah, I mean, I think the formula worked. Like, it was very low. I mean, pretty low budget. You just have to pay a dog and his trainer. So it's food and a trainer. I
guess they had a lot of celebrities make cameos.
It's a fair amount. There weren't that many. There was one with Mike Myers, like a
Megan
teenage.
Follows was on
Megan
it.
Follows, and I mean, these are not huge. I mean,
Canadian celebrities.
Yeah, it wasn't like Michael J. Fox was on it or something, but like Al Waxman, the King of Kensington.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a future episode of Sweater Weather, although it's too old probably for our audience.
Nah.
I never watched it.
Oh, Aaron, we don't have an audience.
Especially for this one, because it's this is a premium episode, so there'll be fewer people listening to this.
Oh my goodness!
But it's important.
Well, so if you're listening to this, thank you so much for being.
You know what I think? Yeah, anyone listening to this is a patron. Thank you so much. Littlest Hobo, he's a patron.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he would definitely, one of his good deeds would be signing up to the Patreon.
Definitely.
But we don't.
I bet he knows how to use a bank account and a credit card and everything.
If there's an animal who does, it's him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the internet.
Any last thoughts on Littlest Hobo?
Oh, I love it.
It's cute.
It's cute, it's sweet, it's amazing. I don't like that the dog actor was mistreated.
I don't know if that counts as mistreatment, but
well, it's not great.
Yelling at a dog's probably not the funnest thing to do all day.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea of the show is pretty great, and who doesn't want to be saved by a dog? And again, it's not a dog; it's a very special creature who can do anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for talking about Littlest Hobo with me.
No, thank you.
Okay, and thanks to you for being a patron and listening, and see you next time.
Thank you, patron. Bye.